Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us once again in our time. Today, I have the pleasure, it's just a thrill to have the opportunity to interview someone that I think of as a mentor. And this is a special moment for me. I would like you to meet Anaida Colón-Muñiz,
Good morning.
who is going to just fill us with wisdom this morning about the world of education. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here today,
Yes.
being with you. We have not seen each other for a little bit, so it's
I
fun.
know. It's amazing how, when you see each other online, you don't realize how long it's been in person,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
So we just have now this opportunity to reflect on what's happening in the world of education. I know that you've retired and joyfully so.
That's right.
And still, an educator is an educator is an educator forever. And I'm curious to hear your reflections on where we are at this time.
Education. It's
Mm-hmm.
always seems to be like a pendulum. We seem to make progress, and then there are always these forces that want to pull us back.
Mm.
So it's a constant struggle and push to keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in that right now. As you
Yes.
know, politics is always in education.
Yes.
And so the same political atmosphere that exists in the elections and everything else is influencing schools and what happens in schools. And different states go about it in different ways. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think we're lucky to live in California in
In
many ways.
in so many ways, very true, very true. And still, it is troubling to be aware and witness what's happening in other places as it relates to education, um, challenges that have been a part of the academic context for generations. And, right now there's upheaval.
Right, right. Like the
Yeah,
banning of books, for example, we
exactly.
lived through that over 20 years ago, and then before that, and now it's back again.
Mm-hmm.
Books that we know are classics that are important. And
Yes.
as we, as students, read and opened our eyes to a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
and helped us to become better human beings and adults,
Mm-hmm.
are now being prohibited in many places. And
Yeah.
it makes no sense,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it does not. It does not. And at the same time, it's not surprising to me, given that there's so much activism happening right now and accelerated by the pandemic. It's troubling to those who've created these oppressive systems
Mm-hmm.
that include making sure that in the educational world, only certain pieces of information are provided.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
education is supposed to be a sacred place
Mm-hmm.
where ideas can be explored and questions can
Mm-hmm.
be made, and
Mm-hmm.
children can be asked to be curious and not to be complacent
Mm-hmm.
and to seek ways to make a better world as they become older. But these, the more there are actors or players who want to move forward and create a more open space and tolerance,
Mm-hmm.
the more we seek that, the more these more conservative forces push back
Yes.
and want to pull us back to times that were in the past where there was more complacency because it was so oppressive and because they were trying to shape a certain type of person. And
Right.
so there's always that tug of war
Mm-hmm.
going on in education, and teachers then are called to limit themselves as human beings. And as educators, we're always bringing who we are into the classroom.
Yes.
whatever our cultural, linguistic, gender identities, whatever it is, we bring that. That's part of our teaching. Well, now teachers are being asked to dehumanize.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gay, you can't talk about that. You can't bring in any literature that might open children's eyes to the fact that a child may have two mommies
Mm-hmm.
in the classroom or two daddies.
Mm-hmm.
So those are forces that sometimes are. They say it's about religion, but it's more political than it is really about belief systems.
Absolutely.
And the same thing in forces that we had in the past limiting language. Now we, in California, for example, and throughout the United States, there are more bilingual programs, but we lived through 20 years plus of Proposition 227. And in other states like Massachusetts, and Arizona, we lived through a period where that was being repressed and they wanted to go to English only. And this idea that the United States is an English-speaking country when it never has been.
It never
solely
has been.
English,
Mm-hmm.
and never will be. So from the beginning, with indigenous populations and all the different immigrants coming from everywhere, people were speaking every language in the world, and that continues to be true. Yeah. So to say, we're only going to be English speakers, or we're only going to be Christian because this is a Christian country, when we know that there have been people of Muslim background and Jewish background, and I mean every Buddhist of every belief system, atheists, agnostics, and to think we're going to push one way when we're a democracy, where it's supposed to be open for everyone, no matter who you are, no matter what you believe, no matter how you look. But we know that there's always that pushback to a world that was idealized by, or is idealized by, certain people who are afraid. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of being more accepting of difference. And that's where we are right now. It's just that total pushback, and it's frightening in some ways, but it's also energizing in some way, because in those moments, it's when you find that people begin to realize that many of the things we fought for in the past are at risk, and it's time to become active again. It's time to fight back. It's time to not allow, for us to go back to the 1950s, for example.
Right. It's interesting to see how the activism is growing. And I remember that in the midst of the pandemic, we reflected on this when this experience of a podcast was being born, and I didn't even realize it. And you joined me in that first episode. Well, it was 2 weeks in a row, one week in English and 1 week in Spanish. 4 years ago, just a few days ago. Amazing
how time passes.
And at the time, we were talking about exactly this, the impact of book banning, the intention behind it, all of these things that you just described, and they're still in progress. And we still have to scream about it. Thankfully, we see that people are taking more initiative to curate the experience of education of their children, where there isn't a dependence only on what will happen at school.
Exactly.
Because it's important that, the narrative of our cultural experiences be more robust than these book bannings are allowing, right? So what would you say about the different forms of activism going on, creativity of parents nowadays to resist the intention of the oppressor?
Oh, wow. Well, I think there's more information available to parents now. And I think through social media and technology, parents can look up information and provide access, whether it be live or through technology, children can learn about the world. They can learn about music.
Mm-hmm.
They could learn about other activities that perhaps their schools are not, utilizing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just what's available in that particular school or location. Now the world is open, and it could be in any language, and it could
Mm-hmm.
be, through any medium. So I think that is good. I think the thing with technology that sometimes we have to watch for is the fact that with all these cookies and things that specialize uh, in giving you only what you want,
Mm-hmm.
it also closes up opportunities to see other things. And and that's one of the reasons why I think the conservative movements to the right have become so much more extreme.
Mm-hmm.
Or we have extremism because they sort of look for giving you what you want to see, the news that you want to see, the kinds of activities that you want to see. You by mistake you click one button and all of a sudden you're getting, you say you like rice and before you know it you have, 100,000
Yes.
versions of rice.
Yes.
So I think that's something that we have to be aware of and
Mm-hmm.
try to monitor ourselves, especially now that we could control
Mm-hmm.
cookies a little more. We're like,
Mm-hmm.
what, who do we want to really give our information to?
Right.
So it calls for us to be more media savvy,
Yes.
but at the same time, the opportunities are endless. But we could talk about a whale in a book and then view it on a large screen,
Mm-hmm.
before maybe having the opportunity to see one. And, and if you're not living near an ocean, it's really hard. But if
Yeah.
you're in California, having that opportunity at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, try to get to the closest to the real thing, but it's not always possible. But
Right.
now we can see and hear,
Mm-hmm.
the how huge a whale is, or an elephant, and how they
Mm-hmm.
move. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think there's opportunity. I don't want to see us going back, for example, to just, little workbooks with tiny little pictures when we have the richness
Yeah.
of having all these dimensions of what life is really all about. And
Yeah.
so parents can look to that. They can do research. They can offer their children opportunities. I think public schools, and I imagine, some private schools and are do their best, given the conditions that might surround them. Because
Mm-hmm.
every school has its own microculture,
Mm-hmm.
and each community does too. So depending on where a person lives and what is happening in their environment, I think it makes a difference. But I do think parents need to be active in their schools if they're able to try to also help, you know, move the school in ways that is more
Mm-hmm.
engaging
Mm-hmm.
and interesting for the children so that they
Yes.
want to learn, continue to learn,
Mm-hmm.
and offer those opportunities for them to grow.
Mm-hmm. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of my mom, who, like you, is a retired teacher, but still, forever a teacher.
Right.
And one of the things that I remember my mom being really committed to as a teacher is engaging the parents, but not only the parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles. She engaged them in the school life. And so, one of the things that she pointed out, and studies show it, when children see the adults in their lives involved in the school activities, they perform well. They do better, because there's that engagement. There's that
Absolutely.
engagement. And so there's opportunity for creativity between teachers and parents. And I realize this is ideal. It does not necessarily translate well for all parents who would like to be this involved or even all teachers who would like to have more of a collaborative experience with families, because it's not easy, particularly now,
Yeah.
to be a teacher
Yeah. Or a parent.
or a parent or a parent.
It's
Yes.
it's hard, and you coined it right now federally and motivationally throughout the states. This idea that it's not just parent engagement, it's family engagement. I'm working
Mhm.
with a colleague who's publishing a book on that, and I'm collaborating with her.
Mhm.
And this idea that it's about the whole family,
Mhm.
because also you don't know who is caring for the child at home. It could be a
Right.
caretaker,
Right.
it could be a grandparent,
Mhm.
it could be, um, adoptive parents. So it's about broadening the term.
Mhm.
And for those people who can and have the time to be able to be involved and to participate. And you're right on that when children know that their families are involved in the school, it changes the whole game plan, because it
Mhm.
used to be, it was like,
Mhm.
school's over here and I could be this way in school, and home is
Mhm.
over here,
Mhm.
and never the twain shall meet. And,
Right.
my mom doesn't really know what's going on. So,
Mhm.
um, or my dad or whoever's taking care of me, and I could play this game. But I, as a teacher, remember that once I made a home visit, or once I invited the caretaker of the families to the school, all of a sudden, the kids were like, "Oh, I
Mhm.
I know my mom knows the teacher, or my dad, or whoever, or my grandparents, and I'm going to be different. I'm going to be mindful." Or now I have a community that
Community.
is watching me and
Yes.
taking care of me, and how
Mhm.
I behave affects everything. So
Mhm.
it's not just about their behavior, but I think the fact that they realize that their activities and their actions are valued
Mhm.
in
In
that
the community.
community, and
Yeah.
that when they perform in a little show, or when they bring home an art piece, or something they've written,
Mhm.
that it's part of that community
Yeah.
and that it's valued. So
Yeah.
I think that dynamic is very healthy. It's really, really good, because
Mhm.
it does take a village, right,
It
to
does.
raise children.
Yeah.
And I think they feel more cared for, more watched, when they know that. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I'm working with Maria Quesada, who, of course, was very involved with family engagement throughout her career.
Yeah.
And that book will be available to schools, but it's really encouraging them to get the whole family engaged,
Beautiful.
and to find ways to do that, where it's not just about the teachers telling parents in one day that they go to, back to school night,
Mhm.
or a principal calling a parent or
Right.
saying, your child did this and that,
Right.
but rather that it's an ongoing communication,
Mhm.
and that the parents are part of that process together with the school, where they uh, really orchestrate what goes on in the school too.
Orchestrate.
You
Orchestrate.
know?
Yes, that's exactly the word that comes to mind when I think of my mom. The idea that there's synergy there
Right.
in the collaboration with the family. And to your point about home visits, during the time when I was an intern, accumulating these hours to become licensed, a lot of the work I did in therapy was at an elementary school. And so I had the opportunity to, see the children in the classroom, experience them in the playground, eavesdrop also,
Right.
and
Right.
visit them at home.
Right.
And you get to see the contrast in their behavior at home uh,
Hmm.
in relation to the behavior at school. And it was so interesting to then engage all of the adults involved to support the child's experience, and notice what's happening in
Yeah.
their inner world that shows up the way they play, the way they interact with their classmates,
Right.
all of these things. In you know, this African proverb, again, the village. It takes a village.
Takes a
It
village.
takes a village.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's so important. I remember doing school visits. I was taking some classes I did my master's at Bank Street in New York, and I took this course called The Child and the Family. And I had to find out about the lives of the children in my classroom.
Yeah.
And it was really eye-opening. And for some of my students, I realized it was amazing that they even came to school every day. And I remember my husband, who, as I said, is a psychologist. He said, there's so many things you cannot control, but you can control what goes on in your classroom.
That.
And the kind of day they have, so make it a good day. And it really, as an educator, it really allowed me to be more creative and engaging and to make sure, because the combination of Bank Street and the things that he said in that course, say, you know what, this, drill and kill 3 R's kind of teaching and learning is very limiting for children. And many times a turnoff, if they don't find love and joy and excitement, and they're not fascinated by the idea of questioning and answering their questions, you turn them off. So it became a lot more about active learning. And, we walked to Central Park. We did the scientific method. We created questions about the things we wanted to see, and we went to look for them, the ants and the birds and the ponds and the trees. And they were just so jazzed about learning that they would come back and they would continue to research as part of the curriculum that was more integrated, where they saw math and everything and reading, and they were buying books about the ants and about bats in Central Park. And they were learning about the history of Central Park. So they were doing all these different curricular pieces of a puzzle.
Yeah.
We still had to do the textbooks and prepare them for the tests. But this idea that there was a section of the week that we could engage in this was a turn on.
Yeah.
And it really, I think, makes a difference what happens in the classroom. At the same time, getting parents to join us, to go on those field trips, to come with us to the Museum of Natural History, and to explore together, and to get them also jazzed about it. So I think in an ideal world, we would have that kind of collaboration and engagement. Of course, it's very difficult with parents who are working 24/7 or their families don't have a lot of time for that. But there are things that they can do at home when they do have those moments with their children. But as you mentioned before, I think the fact that the children know that there is this synergy and this collaboration changes the whole dynamic in the classroom.
It's interesting. And you're describing all these experiential ways of learning that stimulated their curiosity.
Absolutely.
And curiosity is exactly the thing that we need to nourish, especially so that we don't rely only on what's given to us, but we become, self-motivated to learn.
Exactly.
And that's quite an interesting way of resisting oppressive
indoctrination.
All of these things that have been going on for generations, and that I can't say it enough. The pandemic revealed a lot of what was going on for generations. All that was problematic and still is became more visible, not more frequent, more visible.
More visible. I work with a center, children's center, a little bit in Santa Ana, where they have a program called the Wraparound Program. A friend of mine, another Boricua, Ana Jimenez Jami, she runs the Orange County Children's Therapeutic Arts Center, so there's therapy involved, but she integrates children who may have special needs with the general population. But one of the groups are kids who were referred for because they're having difficulty in school, and so they have tutors who go out. And so I created a way of assessing that's more of a holistic approach, because it is a wraparound. So it's really not just what happens with schoolwork,
Mm-hmm.
but it's what happens with the environment at home, the motivation that the child has about learning, their habits,
Mm-hmm.
what they understand to be assignments and how they perceive
Mm-hmm.
what their responsibility is vis-a-vis those tasks that they're being asked, to complete.
Yeah.
It's emotional. It's so much more than just what might be in a homework assignment or a textbook.
Right.
So it's really about looking at, again, even what kind of access they have to technology at home.
Right.
There's a big divide
Mm-hmm.
between kids who have a lot of access
Mm-hmm.
and can complete
Mm-hmm.
projects and things,
Mm-hmm.
and kids who don't.
Yeah.
So it's really supporting the child in many dimensions,
Yeah.
rather than just thinking, oh, I'm going to tutor in this assignment.
Yeah.
And I think we have to look at that and see what is happening around the child. One of the things I think elementary schools have, and elementary school teachers, for the children that you start to lose in middle school and high school, is that the elementary school teacher is multiple subjects, so they see that student
Mm-hmm.
and how they are in math, or how they might perform in language arts, and they might do really well in language arts but struggle in math.
Yeah.
So the teacher might find ways to make it more connected to language arts if that's what they're successful in, so that they could bring in that math or history. They see the more of a whole child.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in middle school, high school, as they go into single subjects, that teacher really sees that one facet
Yeah.
of a child.
Yeah.
They see their performance in history, or they see their performance in language arts, and don't really know that student, how they do in sports, or how they're doing in music, or
Mm-hmm.
whereas that elementary school teacher might have that better sense of the student.
Mm.
So just seeing that one facet of a child,
Yeah.
I think, limits the opportunities for providing a more holistic approach to education.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was an administrator at a district, we had to do an assessment again, and I said, well, it was a writing assessment, and I said, well, instead of just the language arts teachers looking at the students' writings, we have to have the whole school look at their writing
Mm-hmm.
in teams. As a matter of fact, we even incorporated some of the non-credential staff.
Mm-hmm.
We had some of the assistants, and even in some schools, they even invited some of the janitorial staff. Just said, "Come on, look at the writing. Let's get into teams and look at the writing."
Again, community.
And it
Mm-hmm.
was so revealing.
Mm.
Especially at the secondary level, you had a math teacher saying, "Wow, I didn't know so and so could write like that."
Mm.
Or the history teacher saying, "I didn't know that the student read like that. I think I'm going to expect more of him or her in this area." So the child suddenly became this person that had multiple facets that they could see
Yeah.
and use to help the student in the classroom. And teachers also, who I know personally, who make it a point to go to the basketball games, or to go watch a performance.
Mm-hmm.
They get to know that student's strengths in the other ways, and you could
Yes.
bring those strengths in
Yes.
and utilize them and
Yes.
have those higher expectations, so
Mm-hmm.
that the student can reach higher limits.
So then it sounds like a community approach to supporting the child's development.
Absolutely. There are schools that have teachers meet even
Mm-hmm.
at the secondary level in interdisciplinary teams,
Mm-hmm.
and so they get to have conversations about the students. And I think that's a really good idea especially when you get into the single subject
Agreed.
schools. Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed. You mentioned, and I can't help being interested in this piece. You mentioned that center that provides art therapy, and I'm obsessed with the arts. And so,
We have to make a visit there.
yes, I have
I
to. I
think you'll
have
love
to go there.
it.
And it's interesting to hear that that's happening there, because one of the pieces that can be helpful to a child is, you know, to discover more about their inner world through art making.
Mhm.
And it's also another way of engaging the adults in the life of this child. And since we were talking about, the family engagement, uh, I wonder how at that center this unfolds, because not all parents are able to do these things that they would like to do. Some parents actually don't realize that they could be that involved because maybe their parents were not that involved. I mean, there's infinite narratives,
Right.
you know, but so much of what happens in the life of a child is connected to what's happening in the lives of the adults that are in their world. So I'm
Absolutely.
curious about, you know, what at this point in history, with all the things we're becoming aware of, one can be more supportive of parents. You know,
Yeah.
not only schools but other parts of the village to
Right.
support parents, because
Absolutely.
parents need a
Absolutely.
village. If they don't have it,
Absolutely.
they burn out.
Well, and that's one of the things about this center. It's a nonprofit in Santa
Mm-hmm.
Ana, the Orange County Children's Therapeutic Arts Center. And they have little miracles happening
Mm-hmm.
all the time. I've seen children with autism who just transformed through the arts to become opera singers and
Mm-hmm.
violinists. And
Mm-hmm.
you provide this kind of an environment where the parents are also fully engaged
Mm-hmm.
and the children flourish, especially when you're not limiting their capacity
Mm-hmm.
and you're tapping parts of their brain that, where they might say, oh, this is a place where I can shine.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been really, I used to be a board member many years ago, and now, support the center in whatever ways I can.
Mm-hmm.
But Dr. Jimenez Hami, of course, has been with that. She founded that. So she's the founder and the executive director. And her belief is really that the arts are a way in to, with the families and the children, to really change their world. And
Mm-hmm.
it has been a pleasure to see that. And it works in sync with the schools. These
Mm-hmm.
nonprofits can enhance the experience for
Mm-hmm.
children and be part of that net of support and network of
Yeah.
support where during the afternoons or Saturdays they can go to a place, a space that provides those opportunities because the school can't do it all.
Mm-hmm.
And the short school day is
Mm-hmm.
impossible. And not all parents have
Right.
the finances, the ability to say, I'm going to pay for ballet or I'm going to pay for,
Exactly.
guitar lessons. And,
Exactly.
and in this center, they offer it all.
Mm-hmm.
They offer it all. And the parents come to Dr. Anna and they say, oh, well, we want karate. And next thing you know, there's karate class. So
Mm-hmm.
those nonprofits in our various communities are part of that puzzle that can help support children to fully flourish and
Mm-hmm.
to become all that they can be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really wonderful, the services that are also in collaboration with schools,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes some of the local schools come to this, have assignments at the center, um, and other times the art teachers are invited to go into the schools, so they
Yeah.
have contracts
Yeah.
with some of the schools, so it's really broad, and as well with higher education, because I have sent students, when I was a professor, I sent students there to do some of their field work, because these are places where you, as a teacher, future teacher, because I was in teacher education,
Yeah.
these are places you should learn about in your communities. Find
Absolutely.
out, where are the Boys and Girls Clubs?
Yeah.
Where are
Yeah.
these
Where are
centers?
the resources?
Where are the resources where we could tell parents, you know what, there's this space where you can
Yeah.
go after school,
Yeah.
or where your child can go on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And so as an educator, we should become informed, not be, kind of helicopter teachers that, go into a community until 2:33 and then leave,
Yeah.
but rather to also learn about where we are and
Yeah.
what kind of resources
Yeah.
there are in the community. So we could become a resource for the families
Right.
in the school.
Because it definitely needs to be a community experience to not burn out, to not burn out
Yes.
the parent, to not burn out the teacher. And on that note, I'm really curious about what you recall may have been helpful, especially because you trained teachers to become uh, uh, bilingual teachers, among other things that you were training them to develop in their skills. What did you find helpful to support them in developing self-care? Because it's widely known that teachers walk around exhausted.
I know
Walk
this.
around exhausted. My daughter had her first year of teaching in 2020.
Wow.
What a way to start.
Wow. Yeah.
What a way to start when there was such chaos.
All online.
Such chaos.
Well, I think self-care is really key.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. I saw posting on social media the other day that said teachers are not on summer vacation; they're recuperating.
That's a mouthful.
I remember people used to say when I was a classroom teacher, "Oh, you're so lucky. You get out early. You have long vacations." But what they didn't realize is that it's a 24/7 job. If you're not in the classroom, you're preparing for the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
If you're out and about, you're purchasing materials for the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
You're there. The kids in that classroom are always with you, and it is exhausting, especially depending, of course, on the conditions of your classroom, the kids, the families, how much support you get in the school.
How much support you get in the school. Key thing.
Yes, like, do you get the supplies that you need? Do you get some help to be able to purchase additional support materials?
Yes.
Do you get planning days
Mm-hmm.
where you can collaborate perhaps with other teachers and get ideas? Is there a support system in that district
Right.
to help teachers in their professional development so that they learn the latest techniques, for teaching, and to, learn about the community and what resources are available to them, whether it's statewide or district-wide or in that particular school. I always used to tell my student teachers, first of all, when you get to the school, find out who's who and find out where things are. Find out, where is that supply closet? Where is that place where the teacher retired and left stuff and nobody wants it, but you might be able to use it because they have nothing. I remember as a new teacher having to make everything brand spanking new, and then they change your grade and you got to start over again.
Right.
So also to take time for themselves and to practice mindfulness. Chapman, where I was a professor, mindfulness became a real big thing, and there were even online access to the sounds and kinds of practices you could do for mindfulness ideas. And we began incorporating in some of our courses ideas for that as well, because it can be a real burnout kind of a profession if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And if you don't take time for yourself, because you have to take time to separate yourself, to rest, to breathe, to concentrate on other things, to think about your own life and your family and your friends. I had a an administrator when I worked in a district in Orange County who said, there's a triangle where you need to always think about, yes, your job, but you have to have, your family and friends is the other uh, um, point, and then the last vertex is you.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a balance in that
Yeah.
triangle. You
Yeah.
have to be able to manage and take time for yourself and for your thoughts and for your well-being, as well as taking care of your family and your friendships and your work, your
Right.
career. So I always try to incorporate that as myself as an
Mm-hmm.
educator. To what degree it's done in other places, I don't know,
Yeah.
but it certainly should be a part of every teacher preparation program.
Agreed. Agreed. And one could talk about a list of shoulds, and yet there's so many challenges that teachers encounter, and it begs the question, okay, how about the ethical piece that belongs to the employer? There's certain things that uh, are our own responsibility as it relates to being well. And then there is
Mm-hmm.
ethical considerations that belong to the employer to support that wellness. And so often, the burnout experienced by teachers, by therapists, by many helping professionals has to do with exactly that. There is uh, such a way of ignoring uh, the care of the caregiver, because teachers are caregivers in many ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because those of us who have um, become involved in professions that are about caring for others, the heart is in it. The heart is in it, and you may forget to take care of yourself
Mm-hmm.
while caring.
Mm-hmm.
Forget or learn not to give it importance. So many different stories there. So, what a balance, what I do versus what the environment does for me.
Yeah, and it's also about asking for that
Hmm.
and carving that space for yourself.
Yeah,
It's easy to get lost in that giving,
it
and it
is.
happens a lot to families where there's an elderly parent or
Mm-hmm.
someone, and the caregiver is giving and giving and giving, and then when that person's no longer around, that individual gets sick because they had neglected to take care of themselves, and
Right.
now all of a sudden
Yeah.
their body just
The body
says,
will tell
okay, here
you.
goes. So
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're saying is so important, to not be afraid to say, I think we need a day to do this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
Um, I think teachers' unions try to lobby for those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard
Yeah.
because it's also political
Yeah.
and
Also.
it's also financial.
Mm-hmm.
And so each individual has to find those spaces, and but it is the responsibility, as you say, of the unit, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's the school or district or the state,
Yeah.
to say we should be caring for these individuals who are taking care of our children or who are in these caring professions, to make sure that they're well and that they're feeling like empowered to
To
continue forward.
continue.
And
Mm-hmm.
in order to do that, you have to have that time
Yeah.
to compose yourself,
Mm-hmm.
to find that joy. We as educators get so much reward in by students coming back to us and
Yes.
saying, you were my teacher or you were my
Yes.
professor. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have former students who are now retired, and I think, wow, time passes very
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
Uh, but there are those children who you had who become adults, and sometimes you were lucky enough to have them come back, or you find that note, that child gave you, and those are the rewards that we get
Yes,
as educators.
absolutely.
Or seeing the kids graduate, seeing we had doctoral students who have completed their dissertations and walk and get their hoods, and you're just so proud, and they come back and say thank you. You supported me, you helped me. Those are our rewards.
I agree.
That nourish us, but at the same time, there are other needs that we need to attend to, as you say, and sometimes our places of work need to create those spaces for us, need to give us, let's do a retreat where we just come together as a faculty and we share ideas and we get nourished and we find support for each other. And I also tell when I was involved in the education of these future teachers, find a support network. The students that are in this classroom right now with you might wind up in a different district. That doesn't mean that you can't call each other, support each other, talk to each other, because sometimes you share those experiences. In your school, find a mentor, find somebody who can help you, who can give you ideas. So telling them that they also need to seek those support systems so that they can continue. Because sometimes you're a teacher, and if you're from a family of teachers, it's one thing. But if you're the only one and you go home, they think, oh, your job is so easy. You just take care of little kids and, get out early. I, on the other hand, have to work in an office. And so they don't realize the demands, emotional and physical and mental demands that teaching takes.
It's so much, and I'm glad that we're talking about this, because it's important to have the people in the world of the teacher be aware of what it takes to be a teacher. It's a lot of emotional investment, a lot of time, energy, mental, physical investment.
Oh, yes.
And it takes a lot. To this day, I am in awe of how my daughter moved through the first year of being officially a teacher.
Some of the toughest times.
Oh my gosh, what a time to be doing that. And she's very creative, dynamic, and my goodness, what a trial by fire that was. And so to now be on the ground, as they say, just like when she was student teaching, but so many of her colleagues were suffering too.
Yes. When you had to, I wound up retiring in 2020 and had to do the last semester online, working, with adults, students as adults, to teach several courses online. And the stress that I felt.
That was me also.
Was tremendous. So imagine a first year teacher online, having to prepare materials, working with, these little boxes that are on a screen to make sure that they're on task, to engage them, to make them interested. And my grandnephew wound up starting kinder in that. So he started kindergarten online.
Wow.
So the pandemic has left scars that will continue to, they will manifest themselves in different ways.
For years to come.
We have no idea how.
Yeah.
But it was a tough time for the teachers, definitely, and for the children as well.
I definitely can relate to that, because we were in the middle of a semester and had, less than a day to transform the content into something virtual. And then following that semester, start a brand new semester, with a new group. So a lot of adjustment.
Well,
a lot of adjustment.
In our case, students had also a matter of days to move out of their dorms, go back home, which in some cases meant we're in California. In some cases, it meant going to Hawaii, going to the Midwest, going to the East Coast, going to another country in a matter of days, into situations that varied from one having to be there to take care of grandma to another one that had the kids at home and had to be online with the kids one. And then the time difference. I had students who were having to come on at 5 in the morning because of
Yeah.
where they were, others later in the day.
Yeah.
So very complex.
Very complex.
I had some who were driving because they had to take they were caring for someone. They had to take them to the doctor to go pick, or to the pharmacy to pick up something.
Mhm.
But it was at that time, and their phone was on, and I could see them in the car driving.
Mhm. So all of us that had the luxury, the privilege to use technology to navigate such a hard time, we watched each other struggle. And that whole idea of teachers and family engagement was way more challenged.
Oh, yeah.
And not to mention that if the adults in the life of this child are having some really serious difficulties that make it hard to communicate with them too,
Oh, yes.
that was taken to a whole other level, and so everybody suffered. Everybody suffered. So for me, as a professor, it was difficult. As a therapist, it was difficult in ways I will never forget. And for those of us who are part of communities that have been marginalized, that time was,
Even more stressful,
to say the least.
to say the least.
To say the least.
Yes.
And of all the things that we've talked about today, something that's at the center of our relationship is the fact that both of us are immigrants. So the life of an immigrant at that time was challenged in some very specific ways too. Definitely in the world of education, not everybody had the technology.
Well, this is one of the things we were talking about earlier, was access, and
Access.
that divide, that technology divide. That some families, if they had a computer at all, might have 3 or 4 kids who had to be on a device at the same time to take a class. How do you manage that?
How do you do it?
So there were some districts that made devices available, but now you have to have a strong Wi-Fi because you have to be able to have 3 or 4 devices on at the same time. So it was very complicated, which is why some kids were absent.
Yeah.
Because there were challenges that the schools were just not able to deal with. On the other hand, as I mentioned, some districts found ways of getting access, even Wi-Fi, to communities. So it really was interesting to see who, was able to stand up and take that challenge and carry it forward and help those communities that needed that support.
You may remember that during that very first episode we recorded in 2020, one of the people in our conversation was my dear friend Blaine Watson, who at the time was a principal.
That's right.
And he talked about how that situation revealed how many students did not, and teachers did not have the technology needed and, what was being provided at the library. So, everything that has to do with the world of education is so layered, so nuanced, and deserves attention. And I'm thankful for the teachers that are part of our lives and support our growth during the time that we were in their classrooms and that live in us in the way we move in the world. So much to talk about.
Yes. One of the things is to say, as not only as educators, but as community members, as citizens, not to make assumptions about what people have or don't have, and to find out, to dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
And then to seek those resources and ways of supporting each other.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we're all here as candidates to grow.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Thank you to all teachers. Thanks to you for all that you do, still do. And
it's my pleasure.
onward.
We go forward and we do as
Onward.
much as we can to
As
support our children and our families.
Yes. And so with that, we end on this note for now.
Thank you.
For now. Thank you so much,
It's been a pleasure.
Anaida.
It's a pleasure.
It's our time to move forward with hope, with more consciousness, and hopefully this conversation invited you into reflection. And if it's your first time, please subscribe.